Okay, so welcome everyone to this webinar. So today we are here to talk about improving the productivity of your BIM team while working from home. So first of all, let me just start by wishing all of you a very good morning, good afternoon, or good evening based on where you're located at. So we've got a tremendous response for this webinar, and this is actually our first webinar. So it's really motivating for us. And thank you so much for turning up. And we'll be having a lot more of such sessions in the near future as well. So today, basically what we'll be covering is we'll start with a quick introduction first. I'll introduce myself and, about PlanBIM and today's theme. Then we'll move towards how the pandemic is changing the way we work. A lot of us are probably joining from home, almost all of us, because of the pandemic. So we'll talk a little bit about how that has affected the entire scenario. Then we'll talk a little bit about what is PlanBIM, and then look at how we can increase productivity while working from home, what tools we can use, what software we can use, what are the different tips and tricks that are there. So we'll look at some of that and also at how PlanBIM can help. And after that, we'll have a Q&A session. So essentially, we'll be having almost 45 minutes or so of this webinar, and the last 15 or so minutes we'll keep it reserved for the Q&A section. So for the Q&A session, we have 15 minutes reserved. Through the course of the webinar, you can just post questions through the Q&A tab. So if you've joined through your browser or through your mobile device, you can use the Q&A tab to just type in your questions, and we'll address them at the end of the session. And your questions will not be visible to other attendees. Your presence is also not visible to others, so you can just feel free to ask whatever you would like. And we also have a short poll. So we just have a series of questions that you can answer through the poll tab. You can fill it up throughout the course of this webinar, and the results will be published and emailed to all the attendees after the webinar. So let's start with a quick introduction about myself. My name is Viraj Voditel. I am the founder and CEO of Techture. That's a consulting firm in the AEC and BIM domain. I have experience of working and implementing BIMs. I'm also an Autodesk Expert Elite. I've been a speaker at the Autodesk conference as well in Las Vegas last couple of years. And I've created PlanBIM. I'm the creator of PlanBIM, and I'm advocating the use of cloud technologies in construction. Ever since I've come across how the benefits of how cloud technologies can be implemented in the construction industry, I'm a big fan, and I hope to tell you some of my experience as well as some of the trends that are happening in the industry in today's session as well. So moving on, first let's come back to the theme of today's webinar, which is how the pandemic is changing the way we work. So everything, like there are a lot of things that are getting affected. Behaviors are getting affected. Businesses are getting affected for better or for worse. There are some businesses which are kind of booming, especially digital businesses, whereas most other businesses are facing really difficult times. In the US alone, in the past 4 weeks, there have been almost 26 million people who filed for unemployment. So, things are pretty bad, around the world as of now. And it's affecting us, it's physically affecting us. We're not able to travel. We are not able to, work as we used to earlier. And more so, it's affecting us psychologically, and the impact maybe is going to last for, years to come. So I'll start with a quote that there are decades where nothing happens, and then there are weeks where decades happen. So this was a quote that Vladimir Lenin said almost 100 years ago, and this is very much relevant in today's day and age. because we've just started with the new decade 2020, and if we look back at the past decade, so there have been a lot of things that have happened, a lot of good things, a lot of improvements that have happened in technology in our sector especially. But now these are the very crucial weeks, which are going to influence how the next 10 years will actually pan out. So the pandemic has essentially changed the world as we know it. And humans, as such, have a general tendency of being adverse towards change. We do not readily accept change very easily. And more so, you can take a look at our own industry, which is the architecture, engineering, and construction industry, as an example. So, people in our industry are usually thought of as being resistant to change. The construction industry is, infamous for being infamous for not adopting technology as compared to any other sector in the world. So that's how we are. When we get used to things, we become adverse towards it. But what would happen if a change is actually forced upon us? Which is what is happening through this pandemic. And if we look at digitization and digitalization, so the move towards that has been something is being 15, 20 years, more so in the recent few years because of mobile devices, 4G, 5G networks, all of that kind of thing. But this has been happening for a while. But now what's going to happen is, people are being forced to adopt it. So if we take some examples, we have like almost all schools, all teachers taking classes remotely. Google Classroom and these kinds of software existed almost, they've been in existence for a lot of time, 6, 7, 8 years now. And teachers were taking classes remotely. There was Udacity, there were all these websites for learning new content. But now it's changed in such a drastic way that everyone is forced to do it suddenly. So on the right, if you look at this particular figure, so this is generally, the curve which is looked at when we talk about any new innovation or any new technology. So this is usually how it is. We have innovators, early adopters, early majority, late majority, and who kind of adopt technology in that sense. But this is kind of going to get skewed because of the COVID-19 situation.
We have zero events and conferences taking place. People are not traveling, so they are not able to attend international conferences. People are skeptical to go and talk at different events. So, there's a shift in mentality that is basically taking place. And more and more people are now consuming, entertainment like Netflix, and a lot of movies are now directly releasing on personal devices, and people are preferring that as compared to going to cinema halls and other places. So let's look at some interesting trends that are now happening due to the COVID-19 situation. First is shift towards everything digital. So most people are now, shifting to everything digital. We are having more and more people working from home. It's leading to distributed workforces. Companies are essentially looking at changing the way they operate completely. So, for example, TCS is a big company in India with almost 500,000 staff. So they are planning to have 75% of their entire staff to essentially work from home, even after the COVID-19 situation improves. So that's essentially a big change that is happening. So people are also looking at having less physical meetings and more digital ones because people are now realizing that maybe it's more productive and they're getting things done even when they're meeting digitally instead of actually, going and traveling and spending all that time because they're able to get the same things done. So why not just do things digitally? So that is one of the things, and obviously there's been a huge impact on the travel industry, hotels, retail outlets. So all these things have been greatly impacted because of the COVID-19 situation. So now let's look at what work from home means for the AEC industry, especially. So a lot of projects, especially buildings, have been stalled, and if you look at densely populated areas, so they are the ones where the work has not been moving, and the residential and commercial projects have been hit because of this entire situation. Now, I personally believe that almost all of these projects will resume, but there will be delays due to the pandemic. But now there's also a global uncertainty that's coming in, so people are actually questioning whether projects like hotels or retail outlets, whether they're going to actually generate that much revenue in the future because of the psychological impact that this pandemic has brought. So that will lead to some problems, and there are also a lot of supply chain issues. We took the example of China, where in like January, February, March, these months, because of the high number of cases in China, it led to supply chain issues all over the world. So companies may also look at taking some cost-cutting measures now, whether they think of them as a cost-cutting measure or they adopt that technology more widely. So that may lead to some shifts in the web industry as well.
Yeah, so offsite fabrication precast projects will also definitely rise in the future. These will involve more use of BIM and associated technologies. So that is one thing that will definitely be of help to the BIM industry. So let's take a look at what does work from home mean for the BIM industry as well. So construction projects will involve uh, you know, uh, more time planning and less time executing the construction. People will look at, finalizing everything beforehand and then exactly, constructing on site in minimum time possible. So this will probably lead to increased BIM adoption as there will be a lot more focus on pre-construction. So, pre-construction is something that has been pre-construction, virtual design, and construction BIM. These keywords have been in the industry for quite a while now, but it will be even more in the coming days. So there'll be more focus on automation in the short term as well as long term as people will look at more efficient ways of doing things. Distributed teams will need access to better collaboration tools. Now, I'll come to these topics, in the course of the webinar. But this is one major thing that there need to be better collaboration tools. There need to be, a solution for a lot of challenges that people face in collaboration. We still aren't at the level where people can collaborate seamlessly on models across the internet. So there are advancements, but still there's a lot of work to be done there. There may be a potential move towards a gig economy as well. By a gig economy, I'm talking of people who are geolocated and they are working on projects irrespective of which company they are from or which country they are in. So, just as individuals, forming teams and working together. So that is again one trend that we need to keep a look at. There'll be more focus on LOD 400 and fabrication model creation to ensure that less time is spent on site, and also focus towards digital twins and connecting them with the Internet of Things, our day-to-day devices, and monitoring everything during the construction project as well as post-construction. So all these things were already trending. Uh, don't take me wrong there, but because of COVID-19, there'll be obviously a significant push towards something like this. And also, we've been hearing about a lot of companies doing coordination meetings in virtual reality. That may just become the new normal in the coming days for the projects in the future, because people will avoid traveling and have the social distancing norms for quite some time. So if you look at some challenges now that could happen, so one of the first challenges when we have to work on BIM models is there's a requirement to work on high-end systems, high-end workstations. So a lot of processing power is required. So that is one of the challenge which is not available at everyone's homes. There's also a challenge related to having a good and stable internet connection. There may be a challenge related to software licensing, IT administration, uh, because BIM involves not just people working like individually, but people working together on models, synchronizing their models, working on a single source of truth, and so on. So these may be some additional challenges. There will be significant threats to data security. So a lot of the project data that that all of us work on, that's hugely confidential, and it getting into the wrong hands can be very dangerous. With people now geolocated, and there's going to be a very difficult to track physical security, which people used to do at least in like closed office spaces with access control and so on. So these things, physical security will be a challenge, and digital security will also be a challenge, and also collaboration with the team. So some possible solutions are like virtual workstations, virtual desktops. A lot of these things are, trending. They have been trending since a few years, but not many people had heard of these kinds of solutions where your entire desktop is on the cloud and you can directly access, whichever system you want, whichever, operating system, whichever hardware. You can increase the RAM on the go. So, they may bring some more flexibility in the coming days that people actually forget about having physical hardware as well. You never know. So these are things that will definitely trend up. A good internet connection requirement, it's a big challenge in some parts of the world, but in most parts we have got readily available consistent internet connections, also quite cheap in some of the countries. Other countries are yet to follow suit, but these things will happen as more and more people go online. uh, then we can look at some remote access tools to manage IT administration, software licensing, all of that stuff. Can look at some good cloud security solutions. Uh, Probably we aren't there yet, but there will be more and more developments now that we have identified that these challenges are there. And also, there'll be a lot of cloud-based project management tools that will come up in the coming days. So let's look at the collaboration challenge specifically. So, with the advent of cheap, high-speed internet, collaboration has completely changed. So, if we look at, the uh, era before 2010s, so that time collaboration used to be a very different kind of a challenge, where people did not really think that what we are doing today was even possible, because the internet speeds just weren't there. That kind of hardware just wasn't there. So we cannot really blame the construction industry. Also, people blame the construction industry for kind of being a laggard and not adapting to new change. But with the amounts of data that we have to deal with, the size of projects that we have to deal with, that technology simply wasn't there. But now it's there, and it's continuously improving. So we now face a little bit of a different challenge. So in the past few years, the challenge majorly was, how would different teams collaborate with each other. Maybe there was an architecture office, there was a structural team, there was a MEP office. So they had different Revit files, let's say, and they wanted to collaborate with each other. So internally, they used to collaborate on a local network, and things were all fine. And when they had to share with each other, they just used to send the files across, and just manage it that way. These things have also changed, but now that change is even more required, because the challenge we have is a little bit different. Now, even inside the teams, people are at different places. Most people are working from home, and they need access to these models. They need to be able to share these models very easily with each other. They should be able to see the changes that are happening. Only then the projects that we were delivering earlier as a combined unit, that level of efficiency and that level of productivity will come up. So now, we have a little bit of a different kind of a challenge. But yeah, I mean, that is where you'll see a lot of new solutions come up. You'll see a lot of new things happening, and all of us just need to have a little bit of open mindset in adapting to those. So if you look at BIM specifically, okay, so BIM adoption trends over the past few years. So this is a study that has been continuously being done since 2011 to 2019. So all this data is from the UK, and if you look at it, almost like 9 years back, the people who were even aware of BIM were, not even like half the population who was working in the construction industry. So it's like just 13% were actually using BIM, and 45% were, just aware of it. Now, if you look at that, how that trend has changed, by 2019, like 69% people were using BIM in some form or the other, and only 2% of the people were neither aware nor using. And 96% of the people who were surveyed, they said that they plan to use BIM within the next 5 years. So, I mean, it's like very good days for BIM as such, I would say. And this survey was basically about, what percentage of people have actually used these documents or read these documents. So there is an increasing trend for this as well. And now with the latest ISO 19650 standard that has been published at a global level, so that will, pave the way for standardizing a lot of things in the industry, because, the industry has, in my opinion, been, it's just following up. The standards were not there when people started using BIM, and a lot of us in our companies and in our projects, we kind of invent some new workflows, do find some new ways of doing things. So all these things are happening, and the standards are kind of following from behind. So there's a huge amount of work that needs to be done in terms of standardization. And in fact, that is one of the challenges that we saw, and we thought that Plan BIM could be a solution for that. And if you look at projects, so there are a lot of projects in which BIM is simply not used. Then there are projects where BIM is being used. So, but it's not like half the projects you can say BIM is not being used and half the project BIM is being used, because even though BIM is being used, there is no BIM execution plan. There is no standard way of actually doing it. People are saying that they are doing BIM but not actually doing it. So a lot of projects involve BIM, but there's no actual plan to implement BIM. So there are some projects where BIM is being used, there is a BEP, but even in most projects where there is a BEP, that is a BIM execution plan, it's hardly being used. So I like to categorize the projects in this manner, because a lot of projects today, they create BIM execution plans, but they are like hardly used throughout the project, which is not actually the premise of a BIM execution plan, which I'll come to in the coming slides as well. And there's also like some special projects where BIM is being used. There's a BEP that's being used by everyone on the project. So a lot of times, even though BEP is known, only the people at the top level, they even have an idea of what the BEP is and how it is to be used. But most of the people, especially the people who are actually doing the BIM model creation, they haven't really read the BEP. So these are some big challenges towards BIM implementation that we'll be looking at. And before we move to that, we'll also look at why cloud apps are needed for the construction industry. A lot of us, who are attending this webinar, they have used some or the other desktop software, be it Revit, be it ArchiCAD, be it maybe Tekla Structures, be it Vectorworks. There are a lot of desktop solutions that are available, and they have kind of been dominating in the past, I would say almost 30 plus years. But now, with the cloud computing industry rapidly developing, that's going to change significantly. And through this talk, I also want to inform you of some of these trends and how these are happening. So BIM is actually not just about 3D modeling, because authoring tools will only take you so far. Okay. And a successful implementation of BIM is a lot about getting the processes right. So there are a lot of good tools which will help you create these 3D models, but that's just one part of the equation. That is where you'll now see a lot of cloud applications coming up, And this is not something which is very new. This trend started way back in the early 2010s, where we had a lot of good software coming up. Autodesk came out with A360 at that time, and we had BIMX from Graphisoft, and we had Procore and these tools just starting out at that time. So, based on a survey that was done among GCs, which are general contractors, so, almost 85% of them were actually interested in moving to the cloud. So this was back in 2017, and now with the situation where everyone is remotely located, people are forced to being used cloud software in some way or the other. So why cloud apps are necessary is one is because they involve better collaboration with others and possibly synchronous communication. So usually, like, if a lot of you work with Revit, so I can give this example. Communication between Revit is actually asynchronous. So, when new changes are needed by someone else, they need to request you, then you need to synchronize your file, and then they need to reload latest, and they will get those changes. So it's kind of asynchronous. But with cloud technologies, it's really possible that we actually move towards synchronous communication in the future. So let's see, that would be a very interesting trend to follow. And also with cloud technologies, we have access to faster data processing and access to virtually unlimited storage. So I think a lot of you know about trends in the construction industry, like point clouds, laser scanning, and all of that, which involve a lot of data processing, a lot of data storage. So storing them on the desktop is something that is going to go out of fashion really fast with people moving to the cloud. And there are some really creative solutions out there that will help in that regard. And also in terms of like the overall working, uh, cloud will cloud is essentially, I would say, a little bit cheaper as well. Not necessarily very cheap to change into a cloud system, but if you look at the hardware and other things that you would need to actually invest to get that kind of efficiency, so it's definitely just a fraction of that cost. So let's move on to what is PlanBIM and why we created it. So, based on the theme of my last slide, which is, why cloud apps are necessary. So PlanBIM is actually a cloud application. So yeah, so it's a cloud-based platform which can be used for BIM management and construction management. It can be accessed on all devices. Like we have apps for iOS, Android, and it can be accessed on the web. It can integrate with desktop applications like Revit. So we have a Revit plugin where the data can be accessed as well. It can integrate with cloud applications like BIM 360. And it is kind of being built to be fully customizable to specific project and company standards. And we are trying our best to support open BIM standards like IFC as of now and more in the coming days. So it has been developed keeping in mind upcoming trends in BIM to help people achieve BIM level 2 and level 3 workflows in their organizations. We feel that the cloud is going to be one of the central pieces which will help in achieving those. So a lot of you will be familiar with what BIM level 2 and level 3 is. So I wouldn't go deep into that, but these are some benchmarks that have been created way back. This is not something very new. So these are some of the benchmarks which have been created to actually assess companies' readiness and level of BIM implementation in their organization. So we are focusing on creating and providing tools to help achieve exactly that. It's meant to complement and augment existing project management tools. So because it's cloud-based, we are trying our best to make it talk to other applications as much as possible. And to help achieve organization-wide BIM compliance, a lot of you must be having and implementing BIM on quite a few projects in your organizations, but we always know that there is a challenge where some projects we are able to do it very well. Some projects we are not able to do it that well. Some projects we don't use BIM at all. So we are at that stage where kind of some things have been implemented, some things have not been implemented. There are various challenges. So our focus is to help provide that kind of compliance and fully featured administrative tools for access control and user management. So it's essentially related to scope definition, knowledge documentation, files management, content standardization, tracking and coordination. So these are some of the tool sets that are provided. Uh, Quickly going across why we actually developed it. So it's developed by Texture. So we are a global firm and we are working in the AEC industry since the past many years now. And we've seen a lot of bottlenecks, especially when we talk about the process part of things in a project, and it's really challenging even for like all of us to actually implement BIM in the ideal way that we actually read about in theory. So based on our experience of different projects that we have been doing and implementing various software, doing some custom programming, and using BIM as much as possible. So that is where we decided to start with the R&D effort, and that essentially has now morphed into what PlanBIM is. And so our team works with integrating not just BIM with on construction projects just by developing models and things like that, but we have like a full stack software development team, and we focus a lot on how we can leverage the data inside BIM with other aspects in which construction projects function. So that is where we are developing a lot of these kinds of things inside PlanBIM also, based on some of the challenges that we ourselves face. And that is where it started out as an in-house tool, and now we realize that it's useful for a lot of people like you in and around the world. So why PlanBIM? So with PlanBIM, you can actually create BIM standards and libraries that your team will use. You can actually also measure how they are being used. You can look at improving your BIM team's productivity, and that can be like very significantly increased as well. Then we can increase collaboration and communication within and outside your organization, and you can view BIM files directly on the cloud and analyzing their health and things. So I'll come to all of that. First, let's look at some ways in which you can ensure that your team's productivity is up to speed when working from home. So first, I would say that it's very necessary to create a BIM execution plan for all your projects, even for your ongoing projects. If they don't have a BIM execution plan, now's the time to actually do that. And yeah, it's not necessarily important to actually create a BEP just at the start of the project, so you can do it for your ongoing projects as well, because it will bring a lot of clarity to everyone on the team. So if you already have one, ensure that everyone on your team knows about it, and spend some time with your team, help them understand the BEP, and take some time yourself as well to understand it. And at the same time, focus on not just the short-term deliverables, but also the long-term goals for the project. It will go a long way to improve your team as a whole towards BIM, as well as improve the industry as a whole. Then I would suggest that definitely use a common data environment for sharing files and information. At the same time, know the difference between a cloud file sharing service versus a CDE meant for construction projects. So I've seen a lot of people who use Google Drive, Dropbox, or just a file sharing service, and they call it as a common data environment. Well, that doesn't really fit into the common data environment definition as per PAS 1192, as well as per the latest ISO standards. So know the difference between both of these things, and accordingly make sure you implement that. It will help the team even more when working remotely. And I would recommend to keep the whole project team in mind when you're actually implementing a CD or working on a CD. Not everyone can use desktop software or will have licenses for BIM authoring software. So keep those things in mind. And a good CDs should give the users the ability to view 3D as well as 2D files on the cloud. And follow certain protocols related to sharing of that information and publishing of that information. Uh, then you can also look at using collaborative file sharing software like BIM 360 Design to complement model authoring. So especially in a time like this, this can be very useful. So you can use BIM 360 Design for Revit. BIM 360 Design is also available for Civil 3D now. If you use Tekla structures, then take advantage of Tekla model sharing. And if you're using ArchiCAD, then you can use Graphisoft BIM Cloud. And also, I think Bentley is also providing ProjectWise 365. So there are a lot of these tools which are available at either very cheap cost or almost free of cost, especially in this COVID-19 situation. So you can definitely take advantage of these kinds of things. Also, I would recommend to keep all your content and standards in one place, and that one place will naturally be on the cloud because we no longer have local servers access, or our office spaces where shared drives are there. So keep all of your standards in on the cloud. Make them easily searchable, tag them. These are some of the things which kind of reduce productivity between teams. You can use a content management tool. There are good content management tools available out there. PlanBIM is one very robust option, and make sure only approved content is used in your models. So those are some of the things which you can look at while your team is working from home. Now I'll just talk a little bit about how we approach that problem and what are the guiding principles behind PlanBIM and how you can also adapt those in your organization. So those are standardize, organize, manage, coordinate, and track. So these are the 5 principles which these challenges whenever we are working on new features. So how PlanBIM is structured. So we have workspaces, organizations, projects, and libraries. So essentially, we have workspace at the top. Within that, we have organizations, and within that, you can have projects and libraries. And our aim is to give users the ability to learn from the past, reuse existing content, create standards, and continuously improvise, revisit, update all these contents and standards. So within a workspace, there can actually be multiple workspaces. Within a workspace, there can be multiple organizations. Within an organization, you can have multiple projects and multiple libraries. So in this way, you can actually create a complete digital structure of your organization within PlanBIM. And we have like very advanced access control where you can control various settings at workspace level, at company level, at a project level, and also at an individual level. So all of this access control and everything is just built in. Now, I've spoken a lot about what PlanBIM is, why it is created, and all the I would say the shell part of it. Now let's dive a little bit into the core, and let's start by addressing some of the challenges that usually we have when we are starting a project in BIM. So a natural question is, do we need to use a template or start a template to start with the modeling? If yes, which template is to be used, which BIM components are going to be used in that template, and who's going to make which component. So all these are, some of the challenges that we face, and also how the files are going to be broken down, whether it is by level, whether it is by discipline, who's going to work on which files. So all these are some of the challenges that we face. And even through the project, it's a very big challenge to actually follow the standards. How do we track that the standards that have been prepared, let's say in the BEP, or through a tool like PlanBIM, how do we ensure that it is actually being tracked and followed through the project? Well, these are exactly the challenges that we have taken, and we've tried to create solutions for it. So now you'll see like kind of the PlanBIM interface, and some of the aspects of PlanBIM. So I'll not be going into detail about each one of them. We'll be doing that in the upcoming webinars. But my idea today is just to give you a glimpse of what all things are possible. What you see on the screen here is that you can actually define the level of detail for various kinds of components that are to be used in the project. So all the different elements, they are organized by the OmniClass standard in this case, and you can define the LOD, you can define the LOI, you can tag people, assign them scope of work, and do a lot of that kind of stuff here. So yeah, I'll just forward it a little bit. Yeah, you can also see a 3D preview of the different elements before assigning them to the scope. We can dive into parameters management. So there's a lot of stuff. We'll have a dedicated webinar for this also in this series. So be sure to check out that one. So yeah. So I'll just move on to the next slide. We also have the ability to create a model progression matrix, define, what LOD is required across different phases of the project. So all that can be easily done in a drag and drop kind of an interface. So all that can be done. And yeah, I'll just move ahead. Yeah, so we also have the ability to create detailed BIM execution plans, collaborate on the cloud. It may, like, you can even create contractual documents in this kind of interface. You can collaborate with others. You can, add comments and discuss different sections of your documents here. So this is very similar to what you would have, let's say in a Google Docs kind of a thing. But the major difference is that this is specially made for construction, and we are creating various workflows. For example, we have publishing workflows, we have approval workflows, we can approve or reject certain sections. We can prevent people from editing certain sections. We can control who exactly in the project can edit it, who exactly can view it. So all of that access control is also built in. And additionally, you can also embed information from other sources. Like, let's say this presentation itself, I had embedded in a document in PlanBIM. So all of these kinds of integrations are possible, and even when publishing, you can actually control which sections of your document are being published and which are not being published. So you can actually have a lot of your Office documents, Google Docs, YouTube videos, Matterport scans, PDFs, 3D models. So all of these things can actually be embedded right inside the documents. And we also have integrations with Autodesk Forge, BIM 360, and Revit, which I'll be shortly telling you about. Yeah. So a lot of us, have a variety of sources that we follow for content management and for downloading various families and using those in our project. So there are various good sources available out there. But the challenge is that how do you manage these components? How do you ensure that only the correct ones are being used in your projects? So that is where one of the sections in PlanBIM, one of the modules will come in handy, where you can upload all your entire library to the cloud. You can control which components are being used in which projects. People who don't have access to a software like Revit, they can actually just use the browser, view the families directly in 3D over there, view all the parameters, view the different family types. And all of this is actually tracked with activity. So whoever viewed it, whoever downloaded it, whoever uploaded it, whoever changed the versions. So all of that is tracked. Along with that, we have a Revit plugin that goes along with this, which is available on the Autodesk App Store. So once you install it, we actually have these functions available in the ribbon, and all the families and all the components that you saw in the previous previous section. So those can also be accessed directly inside Revit. So I can directly insert the families. I can search them, filter for them. No one on your team needs to spend additional time in finding all of these things. can directly insert them, and you can also view parameters, family types, and only specifically insert those. And it's not just limited to your loadable families or RFAs, which we generally share, but even your system families like walls, pipes. So all of that can also be uploaded to the cloud and shared with different people on the project. So especially in a work from home scenario, these kinds of things become very useful to make sure that everyone is on the same page and they are using the latest components, using the latest families. So right now we are just having the ability for Revit related content here, but very shortly we are also working on getting like all other kinds of components that you can upload to make your entire library. And we also have the ability to actually view entire BIM files, IFC, Revit, Navisworks, AutoCAD. So all of those files can directly be viewed, or even like MicroStation, these kinds of files, and they can be shared. We have a visual file file management system, which we have kind of built, taking inspiration from visual programming language Dynamo. We've done that, but for files. So you can upload and manage all your BIM files in the cloud, create workflows between them, and also visualize them on the cloud. So that is one part of it. And one thing, coming back to work from home scenario, there's a lot of time spent by the modeling team on irrelevant tasks like, finding the right family, creating the same family again, which someone on the team has already created in maybe another project, searching for family from company directory or, company servers. Again, with people geolocated, accessing and searching in Windows is really a big challenge. Issues trying to figure out the latest version of the family. So these are, some of the things. And even during the course of the project, we see a lot of bloated families are being used. Families not being purged before using, wrong versions of families being used. So all these challenges are there, and files taking a lot of time to load as well. So, so we decided to address this challenge as well. Also, a lot of times we have this question of, why the file got corrupted, who corrupted it, who synced last, what are the changes between the last file and last version and this version. So we decided to also build something to measure performance of the files that you're working on with PlanBIM. So using these kinds of tools, the managers can actually remotely keep track of which files their team members are working on, how productively they are working, and whether there are any issues that need to be troubleshooted, what kind of warnings are there, whether the files can be purged, whether there are families that can be purged. So based on all of that, you can see a complete dashboard of each and every file that you work on, and we assign a health score to it. You can see a historical health score also. You can see how many system families are there in the project, how many loadable families are there, which families are from your PlanBIM libraries, which are not there, how many warnings are there, how many purgeable elements are there. And you can see some creative graphs related to how much time your file is taking to save, how much time it's taking to open, how much time it's taking to synchronize with Central, and so on. And without opening the Revit files that your team is working on, you can actually also, I would say data mining is the right word. So you must have heard of this term, but you can do that very easily with a tool like PlanBIM, where all the files which your team is working on, you can have the entire access, like entire dashboard with you, and you can see all of this information without even opening Revit, irrespective of which version of Revit it is, or who is working on it. So all that information is there. And you can also customize the entire score calculation that I talked about. So to do that, it's very simple. Like we have some projects here in the PlanBIM add-in. I just need to link that with my PlanBIM plugin and check this option to collect analytics data. So once that is done, so what it essentially does is it links your entire Revit project with the PlanBIM project that is there online. So here I'm just going to talk about the analytics settings. So we are collecting a lot of different kinds of data for you. So the software itself will mine all this information from your project. So the one which we saw in the previous slide, and you can actually choose to also remember the choice, so that every time when you save or sync the file, it won't ask you for any pop-up again. It will just do this processing for a little bit. And again, it will not bloat up your file, or it will not increase the file size or anything like that, but it will maybe just take a few seconds extra while exporting all that information. And once that is done, you can actually access that same file's information on the cloud. So, and all this is like live, constantly updating. Whenever there is a sync with Central, or whenever there's a file that is saved by any person, uh, this data will update. It will show you which Revit version they are on, how much the file size is, what time it took to save, when it was saved at, and so on. So all this information is there, as well as here you can see the number of warnings, loadable families, system families, the historical health score, how your file has been performing in the past. So all that can also be seen. And you can see which families are there, what category it is from, how many instances have been placed in the file, whether it is in place or not. And you can even like go back to a previous version and see what changed, whether any levels changed, whether any families changed, or whether any sheets were added. So all that information without actually needing to open your Revit files at all. So all that can be accessed. And yeah, so just a little bit of quick FAQs here. That does this work on Workshed files? Yes. Does this work on Revit files being collaborated on using BIM 360 design? So that also is a yes, but it will be available in our next release. Will this increase file save or sync times? So the answer is also yes, but just marginally, a few extra seconds. We also have an option to, mine more data. Like we can also give you the option to take out information of each and every family, how many CAD imports are there inside the family, how many elements can be purged inside a family. So that will take a little bit more time, but if you just toggle the setting to medium setting, so it will just take a few extra seconds. Does this require an internet connection? The answer is yes. Is the health score customizable? That also you can do. Again, like I am just running through a lot of things here, but what I am essentially trying to do is I'm trying to pave the way for some future webinars, and we'll be covering each of these in a lot more detail in those individual webinars. So does it work on large files? Yes, but it will proportionally take longer to save sync your files naturally. If you're working on a 1 GB file, which takes, let's say, a couple of minutes to save, then maybe this will take a couple of minutes plus a few seconds extra. And will this get implemented on all my Revit files that I use on my system? No, you can actually choose which files you want to monitor. So all of this is very customizable, and you can actually control. Lastly, I would end by looking at one last topic, which is about cloud integrations. So a lot of people already use tools like BIM 360 and some other very good CDs that are there. So we can actually integrate with BIM 360, where you can sync all your users, sync all your projects, and sync files and documents between BIM 360 and PlanBIM. So this is just kind of a tutorial video on how to do that. So I'll just skip all this part because we don't really have too much time. We'll look at the question answer session. But yeah, essentially once you're inside BIM 360, you can log in PlanBIM, and once you've here, essentially in PlanBIM, you can actually go to integrations and then connect your BIM 360 account. And again, we have two options for full access versus partial access. And there's this entire tutorial, and you can connect specific hubs from your BIM 360 account, and you can import your users and your projects and all of that very easily. So, so yeah, I'll not take too much more time. It's like almost we are reaching the end of the webinar duration. So I'll open the dais to all of you. So we'll have a Q&A session. So if you've already put up some questions, yeah, I think I have a lot of questions. Okay, so one of them is like while working on government projects, each phase of the project has different contract and different companies work on it at different phases. Can these projects be managed in Planbim? So the answer is yes. In fact, we have like an entire section dedicated to phase management, and you can create and define various phases, and you can control who is working on which phase. So there's another question, which is Planbim integrated with ArchiCAD or Bentley products? So we don't have a plugin that directly interacts with ArchiCAD or Bentley products as we have for Revit. But yes, the Bentley files like DGN files, iDGN files can actually be viewed in Planbim, and also we support IFC. So all of those can be uh, like all of those files can be viewed as of now directly. In the future, we may consider integrating it with other formats. So, okay, then there's a question, are you working with IFC format? So the answer is yes. So if you have files in IFC format, you can actually upload them and you can view them in the cloud directly. Uh, Then there's a question about, can we perform model coordination, clash detection through Planbim? So the answer is no. It's not a replacement for your clash detection software. You can definitely view all your files in the cloud, but to do a proper clash detection, you can either use Navisworks or a lot of those tools that are there. Yeah, I mean, in the future, we may look at pulling in some of that data and showing that to you through some kind of dashboards in Planbim, but uh, it's not possible to actually, you know, do run a clash detection as such. Uh, yeah, so there is one question that can we define naming conventions in Planbim, which is a very interesting question, and I agree that this is a big challenge that a lot of us face related to naming conventions. So yeah, we do have some ideas, and we do have plans to work on something like it. It would be very nice if some of you who have some thoughts in that direction, if you could share those with us, we'd love to have a conversation and discuss those further. Uh, okay, there are some questions related to the pricing of Planbim. How is the pricing of Planbim? So you can actually go to planbim.io/pricing to learn more about that. So we can contact you to discuss more in detail. But yeah, it's definitely not by a number of projects. So on all our paid plans, you can have unlimited projects. Uh, does Planbim support Navisworks files? Yes, you can upload NWC and NWD files directly. Then there's a question about, is Planbim available in other languages apart from English? As of now, no, but we would be interested if anyone is wanting to help us with translating into their local language. So we would definitely like to be in touch and work towards how we can translate the entire app. So some sections, you can create documents and you can name documents in Spanish or in other languages. You can create entirely your BIM execution plan or other documents in a different language. But yeah, the user interface as of now, it's only available in English. Uh, so yeah, will we be having detailed tutorials for Planbim because there are so many functions that have been discussed? The answer is yes. So that's what we want to do in the near future. We are just trying to set the stage for more of these kinds of sessions. So today we especially received a very good turnout. So that has been really encouraging, and we'll definitely be hosting more such sessions. Um, So yeah, I think does Planbim have customizable dashboards for project insights? So as of now, we only have the ability to view dashboards for your Revit files, like I showed you briefly. So that is what is available right now. Later on, we may look at how you're creating dashboards of how your families are being used, which people are downloading the most, which people are uploading the most, those kinds of statistics. So that's there. And there's a question, do we need to upload Revit families for LOD classification? The answer is no, you don't need to. We have a built-in, built-in system which has already got a system like OmniClass, and you can actually just go and pick and choose over there. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. There are a few more questions, but I think we are running out of time. So we'll be answering, I'll ensure that all of your questions are answered. We'll reply back to you to your email. But most of the questions that people had are, I believe, answered as of now. Uh, in the coming sessions, we'll be diving a little bit more into detail, feature by feature on specific modules. We'll be very interested in learning your thoughts and how you feel you can use something like this, or what is something additional you would like. So uh, we are exactly people like you. So we are very much open to new ideas, and we would love to work on solutions that will better the industry. All right, then. Thank you so much for your time and for attending. So I hope you guys have answered the poll that was there. Uh, oh, I think I forgot to start it. Oh, no problem. Okay, right. So next time then. Thank you so much.